Hey there, everybody. Craig Cottle, Director of Nature Line School. You'll often hear people say, leaves of 3, stay away from me, as it relates to poison ivy. So what I wanted to do in this video is show you several plants that have leaves of 3 that are not problematic at all, as well as take a real good close look at poison ivy and how to identify it. Let's get on the trail. The first one we have here is what is scientifically referred to as Anemone virginiana. Commonly referred to as tall thimbleweed. This actually is a flowering plant. It's a beautiful flower. It'll come out a little bit later as we're looking at it now at the beginning of June. You'll notice these indents right here, which are called sinuses, if you will, on most leaf structures. Venation starts at the base of the leaf itself and comes out from the center stem. But again, we have 3 leaves, but this is not poison ivy. All right, this next one is an actual tree. It's a hickory tree. Let's go take a look at it. So you have 3 leaves here, but that's because this is not fully developed. This is eventually getting ready to be a hickory tree. There will eventually be 5 or 7 here, depending upon the species. But right now it looks like complete 3 leaves and it's done. Notice that it has a soft toothed edge all the way around the entire length of the margin, and each of the leaves come together down here at this base. Hey, here's another one that's fairly obvious that it's not poison ivy, but I just want to point out that it does have leaves of 3, red clover. Here's the leaves of 3 again on this particular red clover. Trifolium pratense is the scientific name. One of the things that stands out to me is the discoloration inside the leaf itself, the leaf structure. But again, notice how all of these leaves come down to basically the same starting point. Look down here and you can see another one that has the bloom attached to it as well. Again, leaves of 3, but this is not poison ivy. All right, this next one is actually an interesting edible that we talk about in survival class on occasion. I've always called it woods peanut. I looked it up and it looks like it's American hog peanut, and I'm going to butcher the scientific name, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. Amphicarpia bractata. Jennifer will have the actual spelling in the video, but let's take a look at it. As this comes up from the main stem, the leaves on the left and the right are going to be, a good inch down from the terminal leaf that is here at the very end of the stem. Notice that around the edge that there are no lobes or sinuses here, and they come out to a point here. But again, this is leaves of 3, but this is actually an edible. Not in this season, I couldn't find any, but if you look later in the season, you'll find tiny little peanuts on the root system of this that are edible. All right, this next one, you all, is actually a woody stem tree that very often people send me pictures of and go, is this a poison ivy tree? And it's not. Let's take a real close look at it. Acer negundo, the box elder. This is actually in the maple family, and it has the characteristics that a lot of people think makes poison ivy. It does have a red stem here, 2 leaves on either side. You'll notice that it has sinuses and lobes on the left side here, sinuses and lobes on the right side here, and then it has sinus and lobes basically on the central leaf as well on both sides, which is very similar to poison ivy. Here's some things that are a little bit different. Number 1, it's a tree. And the stem that this leaf is actually coming off of is a green stem plant. And this is really indicative of what most of your box elders look like. And look at where the leaf stems come off. They come off opposite of one another, which is an indicator of one of the maple species. Also, take a look at these stems right here at the base of the leaves on the side. Look at the stem there versus the stem here, and we'll compare that when we look at poison ivy here in a moment. Hey, I have one more that's a honorable mention, sort of, because it's mostly leaves of 5, but I'm going to show you something here. This is Parthensis quinquefolia, I think, something along those lines, commonly known as Virginia creeper. It has 5 leaves, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You'll see 5 right here. But on this same vine, you'll see these leaves of 3 right here. The interesting thing about Virginia creeper is that for most people, it is not something that will cause contact dermatitis like poison ivy does, but for a lot of people, it does. So it's one of those plants that often gets mistaken for poison ivy, even though it has 5 leaves. But with that said, I would avoid it under most circumstances until you know that it does not cause problems for your skin. Finally, we are to the poison ivy. Toxicodendron radicans, I believe is the scientific name. Some variation of it. You can see the words up on your screen now. Poison ivy. Let's take a close look at it and we'll see how we can identify it. Again, today I want to be clear, we're just looking at the leaf structure. We're not going to look at the vines. I'm actually going to do another video on vines and how to notice the differences on that later. Classic poison ivy right here, which I want to point out that a lot of times it's not classic. So coming up from the main stem, you have this short portion that gets more robust red right where these leaves come together. But along this stem right here, it does have a reddish tint to it. Something to note though, on the right and left leaves coming up from the main stem, you'll notice that the leaf stem itself is incredibly short, basically right at the primary stem, and the petiole of this particular leaf, the terminal leaf, is longer. Very similar to our box elder that we talked about earlier, but this is a viney growth and not necessarily a tree. Okay, so notice the veination here. The veination is that the veins come up the center portion of the leaf and then they branch off either side from the center. Notice this too. This is real common, but this is going to change. Let's be clear on this. You'll have on the right leaf, you'll have basically a lobe and this small indentation, sometimes referred to as a sinus, on the right. Over here, you'll have a lobe indentation on the left. And then on the center, you'll oftentimes have that on both sides. You can see that a little bit right there. You can see it really well right here on this one. But if you look around in here enough, you'll find some that don't match up with that very well at all. Like that doesn't have that on it at all on the right side. So this is poison ivy, something to avoid. Leaves of 3, stay away from me. But keep this in mind, there's a lot of things out here. I only showed like 5, what was it, 4 or 5 things that have leaves of 3 that are not problematic at all. So some things to look for. Look at the stem, look at the length of the leaf stem itself, look at the coloration, look at the edge of the leaf itself. What does the margin of the leaf look like? Is it sawtooth? Is it smooth? Does it have a lobe here? Does it have a lobe there? These are all the things that you should start looking at on a micro level to be able to more specifically identify things that are harmful to you. The reason I like showing this stuff is because you say leaves of 3, stay away from me. Somebody goes out and sees how many things are out here have leaves of 3 on them, then they're afraid to go to the outdoors. Teach them how to identify poison ivy specifically, and they'll be more likely to get outside, because we like to come on, join in and learn together.